Hello and welcome to iPads in the Enterprise, How to Put Them to Work for You webinar presented by Jon O'Neil Sr. I'm Justin Dexter from TrainSignal, and I'd like to take a minute to tell you what to expect in the next hour. I'd like to draw your attention to the questions box in your webinar control panel. Jon will be answering questions today, so please submit any questions you might have during the presentation. Also, if you have any technical difficulties, let us know in the questions box and we'll do our best to assist you. Today's presentation will be recorded and available to view tomorrow. We'll email you with the link after the presentation. After you exit the webinar, we will be prompted to take a short survey. TrainSignal wants to hear from you, so please take a few minutes to complete the survey. We'll also be choosing one participant from today's audience to receive a copy of Enterprise iPhone and iPad Administrator's Guide by Charles Edge. To be eligible to win, you must complete the survey you will receive after the webinar. Be sure to fill it out. It only takes a few minutes. Also, if you have any additional comments or feedback, you can email us at webinars@trainsignal.com. And with that, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Now here's Jon.
Hi everyone, I am Jon O'Neil Sr. I'm the Chief Technologist with AwesomeWildStuff.com and AWS Solutions. I'm a consultant, speaker, educator, and author. I have spoken at Tech Mentor in Las Vegas last year and am doing a number of conferences this year, so I hope to meet many of you in person. Please, if you're attending an event where I'm speaking, feel free to come up and introduce yourself, and I'd love to get to know you. A little bit about AwesomeWildStuff.com or AWS Solutions. AwesomeWildStuff.com is a venture that I'm part of that focuses on presenting to the world very unique and exciting products, solutions, technologies. We have everything from custom video jukeboxes for your home to laser engraved baby rattles. So just very odd, very unique things. We all come across them as we travel through life, and often they're at small mom and pop shops that don't have a lot of exposure. So AwesomeWildStuff.com is a venture that aims to bring those things and present them to a wider audience. AWS Solutions, on the other hand, is the consulting and teaching arm of AwesomeWildStuff.com. It focuses on providing out-of-the-box, unique solutions to modern business problems, right? The IT world is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and businesses need to be able to take advantage of that. IT truly is an enabler for the modern business or educational organization, government organization, and AWS Solutions looks to help those organizations move forward. So with that, let's get into today's webinar, iPads in the Enterprise, how to put them to work for you. A little bit of background on the iPad. The iPad has been the benchmark for tablet computing since it was introduced back in 2010. It's only been a couple years, but it seems like forever the iPad has been out there, and that's really a testament to how much of a splash it has made in the world. Now, it of course is in lots of homes, it's in lots of schools, but it is now in most enterprises that you run into, and we'll get back into that in a minute. But why is this thing so cool? Why did it change the game? It's certainly not the first tablet that was released. There's been multiple attempts at creating a handheld finger-run device over the years. I remember them as far back as 10 years ago. But they never really made a splash. They never really took over as a device that people could use to empower their consumption of information, and certainly not as a replacement for creating content. Well, the iPad changed that primarily because it has a large, high-res display, right? You can look at things in clarity that we've never seen before. It has a very lightweight and a good battery life. This section of the presentation, we're going to get into some fun stuff. We're going to talk about usage scenarios for the iPad in our enterprise. Whether we be in a school, whether we be in a government entity, whether we be in a business, there are typical use cases, things we would want to deploy the iPad to, things that it are suited to. and I'm going to try and look at a selection of those and give you some suggestions for some apps that I've found are good starting points to meet those needs. Now, some of these apps are free. Some of them have a low cost. I am by no means reimbursed for promoting any of them. They are primarily just products that I set out and I said, hey, I want to find the best apps that allow me to web surf from the iPad. And I've done a lot of exhaustive testing and getting feedback from other users, and these are what I have come up with. So please feel free to check them out, ask me questions about them, whatever you'd like, good or bad, but here we go. So before we look at the individual use case scenarios, let's talk about some common uses in apps. These would be uses that you would find in any organization, regardless of the type. Okay? The first use that comes to mind is web surfing, right? I think it takes about 1.4 seconds for a person to pick up an iPad and instantly they open Safari and they want to browse the web. It's either that or Facebook is always the first thing that gets going. I don't know why. It has to be some scientific reason behind it. Anyways, for web surfing, we have the built-in product Safari, which is a great browser. And it handles many forms of content and many needs very well. But there are also other alternatives out there, such as Puffin and Atomic. Okay? And they're all worth checking out and deciding if they match what you're going for. And there's even more besides that. Another common use, file management. When you're deploying an iPad into an enterprise, the need to transfer files between other devices, other users across the network from servers, right, becomes front and center. It's a daily need almost. And there are tools that allow us to do that. One of my favorite is File Browser EX. It's a handy little utility that lets me connect to network shares on servers, look at my camera roll, transfer files anywhere I want, handle zip files, PDF files. It's a good little utility for file management. And of course, Dropbox. Many people are now familiar with Dropbox. It is a cloud-based storage utility. It is great for collaboration. We all have Dropbox accounts no matter where we are in the world. We share them with one another. We can stick files in them that everyone can see. They can modify. We can keep track of things. And there is a native Dropbox app for the iPad. Video conferencing. This is becoming more and more popular, especially as the displays and the cameras increase on the iPad. Great news about the new iPad. The rear-facing camera is awesome. It is just like the iPhone 4S camera. They call it the eyesight camera, right, because it's as good as our eyes can see. The bad news is the front-facing camera still stinks. There's no other way to describe it, right? It's kind of just a basic VGA. And when you're doing video conferencing, you will probably be using the front-facing camera. Now, you're typically video conferencing over the internet, so the bandwidth is limited anyways. But just be aware that that camera is not ABC Studios quality stuff. Email. This is, besides web browsing, probably the number 2 or possibly the number 1 reason iPads are used in companies today, and that's to keep in touch with other people via email. Now, often that is through Exchange, right? We have these huge Exchange infrastructures or even Office 365 infrastructures in the cloud, and the iPad connects directly to those, takes advantage of all the Exchange Active Sync capabilities that are built in, as well as it offers the ability to connect to IMAP servers, POP3 servers, you know, and more. Document viewing and editing. This is an important part in an organization. You get a PowerPoint, you want to take a look at it. You get a Word document. You get an Excel spreadsheet. You need to review data. Okay? You have Quick Office, which many people are familiar with because the Quick Office suite is available for PCs and other things that is completely compatible with the Microsoft Office document formats, as well as Apple's own iWork suite, which includes Pages and Numbers and Keynote, and allows you to open, edit, and save documents between not only other iWork users, but Microsoft Office users. And printing. Printing is a big one. Printing we don't typically worry about when we're using this device at home, but as soon as we go to an organization, it becomes a very important part of using that iPad, especially if you're going to start using that iPad as a primary device, right? You get an email that has a contract that you need to sign. Well, maybe they don't support electronic signatures or whatnot, so you need to print it. You don't want to have to go through a big process. You don't want to transfer it to your PC to do that. So you want to take advantage of the printing capabilities that have been built into iOS. AirPrint is the built-in solution, and then you also have other apps that are available, such as Print Central Pro and HP ePrint, which give you good means to print. Now, one of the nicest parts about AirPrint, if you haven't used it yet, if you have a HP ePrint capable printer, which is probably any wireless network capable HP printer that you've bought in the last 6 months to a year, AirPrint will just find it and print to it. There are no drivers for you to install. There's nothing for you to set up. You literally just print. And that's one of the great things with these devices. That's one of the reasons they've become so popular. Things just work. They don't require a lot of configuration. They don't require a lot of training. Student uses and apps. Of course, we have reading, right? Students should be doing a lot of reading, unless college has changed drastically since I was there, but I don't think so. And you have the standard reading apps, iBooks and Kindle, but you also have an emerging market of electronic textbooks. These are actual textbooks approved by colleges, sold in their bookstores, that are being converted to an iPad format. And K&O, and Inkling are two startups that are really hammering into this market. And the benefit of these books is, besides the fact they are loads cheaper and you don't have to worry about selling them back or rip pages or whatever, they offer smart functionality, right? You can mark up pages, you can highlight, you can sketch, you can share, you can search, all sorts of functionality like that. So I do see that market growing. Reference. Dictionary.com, World Atlas, those are common reference techniques, but StarWalk, it's a great astronomy app. So even if you're not a student, if you're simply a student of life or a student of astronomy, check out StarWalk. It's a great app that lets you look up in the sky and know what you're looking at, and literally you just hold the iPad up and point it at the stars, and it'll recognize it using the camera and the sensors in the unit and tell you what you're looking at. So it's worth checking out. Educational videos, YouTube, iTunes U, time management, things for iPad and iStudies Pro. Those are good utilities to keep your student on track and on time. Now, business professional uses and apps. This is near and dear to my heart. We do consulting for a lot of business organizations that are deploying iPads, and they have a great many opportunities to deploy the iPad and use it to their advantage. These include web conferencing, what we're doing right now, right? You could be watching this GoToWebinar right from an iPad. And the link that you were sent in your email when you registered, it worked great from your PC. If you'd have clicked it from your iPad, it would have worked great from there. It would have just loaded up the app and logged you in. And I'm sure, I guarantee that there is at least one of you out there that is doing that right now. Presentations. We have Keynote and Presentation Link. Keynote is part of that iWork suite. It is the PowerPoint compatible presentation software. The great part about Keynote, the reason it's worth checking out in its own right is it's not just great for viewing presentations that were created on a computer. It is awesome at creating presentations right on the iPad. If you don't believe me, give it a try. Marketing. WordPress, Twitter, Facebook, okay? Project management, you want to use your Microsoft project files and update them and view them. Check out SG Project Pro and Project Planner. Data analysis, this is important in business. We have a business system and we want to see what scrap rates are, production efficiencies are. We can use things like MicroStrategy Mobile. HD pics and videos. This is already booming. In just the last month, the number of requests we're getting for this, because of the new iPad's great rear-facing camera, we're seeing businesses that are taking that rear-facing camera and using it to make HD videos of processes, right? They go out on their manufacturing floor and they take a video of a process. They're using it to make video blog entries to use in their marketing efforts. We're just seeing it being used in very unique and new ways. And the apps that empower those, iPhoto, iMovie, Photoshop Express, Avid Studio has one. They are becoming more and more powerful. They are turning the iPad more from just a content consumption device into a content creation device. And CAD files. Yes, AutoCAD has a native app, AutoCAD WS, as well as there's another app, TurboViewer, that let you look at and make changes to your engineering and CAD files. Okay, an area near and dear to my heart and many of yours, I'm sure, is the IT arena. So let's take a look at some IT uses and apps for the iPad. Remote support. This is a common need that many of us have on a daily basis, and a couple great ways to do that. You have GoToManage from Citrix. It's in the same family of products as what we're using right now, GoToWebinar, along with GoToMeeting and GoToAssist and others. They do make a native iPad solution. There's also SplashTop HD. SplashTop is a really slick little remote control solution, and if you use the standard definition product, it's actually available free of charge. To get the HD level product, you do have to pay a charge, but it's a minimal one. This is a great way to take control of your personal desktop, run Flash applications on the iPad, and a number of different scenarios like that. So network monitoring. Oftentimes in IT, we need to check basic network connectivity, make sure DNS is working, those kind of things. One of my favorite tools for that is aptly named IT Tools. IT Tools contains the oldies but goodies, ping, DNS, NS lookup, you have traceroute, you have ARP, a lot of your basic network level troubleshooting tools. And Mailscape. Mailscape, for those of you with Exchange infrastructures, is one of my favorite current monitoring and reporting solutions. It's a great tool. It provides you a dashboard level view into your Exchange architecture. So you can monitor multiple Exchange servers. You can look at them for key areas such as services, functionality, network, and it gives you a red, yellow, green type indicator. So think traffic lights, right? Green means all is good and go. Red, of course, means things are bad, stop. And yellow is caution. Okay, we're about to have a problem. So when you look up at your dashboard on your iPad and it's all green, you know you don't have anything to worry about. Your Exchange system is working just perfect. However, if you look down and you see yellow, it tells you that, hey, when you're done with what you're doing, you might want to go take a look at the Exchange system and see what's going on. And of course, if you look down and see red, you immediately panic and let out a scream of despair and drop what you're doing and go check your Exchange infrastructure. Well, hopefully not all that hubbub, but you get the drift. So device management, Get Console. Get Console, along with a custom console cable, is a great solution for those of you with Cisco infrastructures. Or even other infrastructures, but Cisco is one that comes readily to mind. You can not only console in and troubleshoot your existing routers and switches, ASAs, but you can literally configure them right out of the box. Just the other day, I took a brand new 3560X switch out of the box and configured it up from start to finish using nothing but my iPad. So if that sounds interesting to you, check out Get Console. Remote control. This is, along the lines of what we talked about earlier with remote support and GoToManage, SplashTop, those solutions, but you also have other products, ISSH, Pocket Cloud, and iTap. Pocket Cloud, I want to mention, it's a product from Weiss, which of course was recently bought by Dell, but nonetheless, the Pocket Cloud product, if you get the free version, you can RDP into all your RDS terminal servers and other RDP protocol hosts if you will, but you're limited to one connection. You can't save more than one connection. If you manage 100 different servers and want to save those all so that it's just one-tap connections, then you might look into investing in the Pocket Cloud Pro app. Both are available from the App Store. For reference, things like iPowerShell from Sapien give you access to the detailed help and examples that you would find from within PowerShell using the get help commandlet, but in a graphical and meaningful way. So with your iPad handy, you can look up and research all your favorite commandlets. Training. The Cisco mLearning Viewer is a great training tool for those of you with Cisco infrastructures. It provides you videos, text-based training, announcements, all sorts of different opportunities, and it is free. So some of the, I say it's free, but let me amend that. Some of the content you might have to pay a small charge for, but it lets you know, and you do have to go through a confirmation process. It will not just charge you arbitrarily. So virtualization. Virtualization is, of course, one of the most explosive, widespread topics today, right, with the cloud and expansion of those kind of things. So common environments include VMware or Citrix environments, right? Well, they both have native apps that run right on the iPad in VMware View and Citrix Receiver. Also, you have products like ThinkGrid. All of them allow you to start leveraging and moving out your virtualization infrastructure to include the iPads in your organization. So now that we've taken a look at all these great use case ideas, right, and we just touched on a few. If you sat down for 10 minutes, I guarantee you could double or triple that number of ideas. All great ideas for you to take an iPad, deploy it in your organization, and make it add value for you and your organization. Well, now that we've done that, let's step back for a minute and make sure that we, meet that goal of ours that we talked about at first, that mission statement, right? We definitely don't want to do any harm. And one of the first things we have to consider is our network, right? The iPads all use wireless network connectivity. So if you have a wireless infrastructure with 10 access points supporting, 30 different notebooks today, and you go deploy 150 iPads into that same infrastructure, odds are you're going to congest and negatively impact, to say the least, that negative infrastructure. So it's very important that before you go buy a bunch of iPads and deploy them into your environment, you go ahead, take a look at your wireless network infrastructure and make sure that it is robust enough to support what you plan to do. In addition to making sure that you have the capacity, you also want to make sure that you have the coverage areas. iPads are often used in areas where we don't typically carry even netbooks or ultrabooks, where we go and do things without them, such as the manufacturing floor, right, or the quad at the campus, possibly the cafeteria. Yeah, you may have wireless coverage in these areas, but you want to go make sure that it reaches all the spaces where you're going to have devices. You don't want to deploy a bunch of devices and then have your users call you and say, hey, I can't connect to the back-end systems from, the right quadrant of the plant, or I'm in my dorm room and for whatever reason I can't get on the campus network. You want to make sure you have good coverage areas. And along the lines of that, many of the iPads today that are being deployed are cellular ready, right? Up until with the iPad and the iPad 2, we had 3G level connectivity, and now with the new iPad, we of course have the possibility of 4G connectivity. Whatever the case, if you're going to rely on that cellular network to deploy these in your organization, you want to make sure it also reaches the areas where they will be used. If this is inside a building, say you have an all-metal building that for whatever reason acts like a super reflective suit, right, as far as cell signals go, it bounces everything off and nothing seems to penetrate, then you're going to want to deploy cellular repeaters so that you can bring that outside signal in. And make sure that those devices will work as you want them to work in the areas you want them to work. You'll be happy and your users will be much happier. So, Kasha?
Yep, I'm here.
Sorry, I blew it.
That's okay.
I thought I was missing a slide here, and I
No
wasn't.
worries. I mean, we can cut this out, so.
Okay, so I
yeah,
can
you
just
can
keep going now?
Yeah, you can just start off whenever, and we'll cut this part out. No worries.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, I'm ready again. So now that we've taken a look at usage for our iPad, and I've given you the caution about making sure your network's ready, let's take a look at one of the things that is critical anytime you talk about deploying an iPad into an enterprise, and that is security. And for me, I like to break this down into 4 broad topic areas, right? And those are going to be device, data, network, and application security areas. The great news is Apple has incorporated built-in measures right into the iOS for every one of these areas. So let's take a quick look into each of these. First, we want to take a look at device security, right? How we can protect the physical device itself regardless of what apps are on it or whatnot. Well, right out of the gate, iPads support the ability to implement passcodes, passwords. And these can be deployed with many of the options that you're already familiar with, right? Pretty much since IT's existed and passwords have existed, I think password policies have existed. Even if they're not technologically implemented, the password policy itself is written down and understood. Well, the iPad, nothing new here, nothing cutting edge. These are all the password policies that we're used to. You can implement a policy that insists that the device has a passcode and the user is not allowed to disable that, so the device will always have a passcode. When somebody picks it up and presses the home button, they will have to enter that passcode in order to get to the apps and the settings of the device. We also have a minimum passcode length and complexity, right? We can say that it has to be at least 8 characters, that it has to contain alphanumeric, whatever we want. We can age it out, make the user change it every 30 days. We can also tell the device that if somebody enters the wrong passcode in X amount of times, that the device will go ahead and automatically factory reset itself, right? Turn it back to an out-of-box experience. I call this re-bricking itself. Not that it's turned into a brick and can never be made useful again, but when it factory wipes, it is basically as it was in that box. It does not have your information. It does not have the settings to connect to your network. It doesn't have anything. It's like a brand new unit again. And it's nice that the iOS allows us to configure it so that if somebody's sitting there typing in passcode attempts, that it just does this automatically. It doesn't need to be connected to a network. It doesn't need to talk to the internet. It doesn't need to get a signal from us. It just counts up the number of failed attempts, and when it hits the threshold you set, boom, the device factory resets. It's a great way to protect our content, our data that is very meaningful and protective to our organizations. Data security. One thing that most people don't realize is the iPad has 256-bit AES hardware-level encryption built in, okay? And that you cannot get a single piece of data, a single character of data extracted from an iPad without the proper AES keys. This is a very high-level, considered obviously compliant with every regulation out there just about, level of encryption, and we can have it on all our iPads. In fact, we do. There's nothing we have to take to implement it. It comes out of the box with that running. Backups. When we talk about an iPad in an enterprise, we immediately have to consider our, disaster recovery business continuity plans. These are no longer being used as consumer devices. They are important organizational content creation consumption devices. So they may have data that we need to protect, and to protect it, we need to back it up. The iPad supports backing up both locally to a PC through a USB connection or to the cloud through Apple's iCloud service. Backup encryption. The backups that we can create can be created clear text, but that probably doesn't work for most organizations. It would allow the content of the device to now be looked at through the backup, and that AES encryption wouldn't protect us anymore. But you can turn encryption on so that that backup file is as protected as the data itself. And local and remote data wipes. We talked about those earlier through a password policy, but you can also remotely send a signal. So you decide that a device was stolen, for instance. You can go in and send it a signal, whether through a MDM utility or Exchange ActiveSync, whatnot, but you could send it a signal to remote wipe itself, and the next time it connects to the internet and picks up that signal, regardless of what the person who holds it is doing, the device will re-brick itself, will factory reset. And locally, it can be done much as we mentioned early on with redeploying. Somebody just goes into settings, general, erase all content and settings, confirms it, and we're back to an out-of-box experience. Network security. Basically, all I can really say about this is those things you currently have on your network to protect it and secure it, they probably are supported by the iPad right now. We have, WPA2 with AES 128-bit encryption built into our iPads. We have VPN support built in. And a nice thing to mention about the VPN support is with each iteration of the iOS, we have increasing compatibility with other VPN technology, right? So even though you go into that built-in VPN settings, and it may appear as if it's designed just to connect you to Cisco devices, does not. In fact, just the other day, I configured a set of iPads for a customer to connect to a WatchGuard firewall and VPN concentrator. So you can do that, and through that, then give your iPad secure connectivity to your network for file transfer, for content transfer, and to let you get to work. Finally, application security. Okay, currently there are well over 200,000 native iPad apps in the App Store. And what native iPad apps mean are these are apps that are not designed for the iPhone but are designed for the iPad, the larger screen, the higher res display, okay, the eyesight camera and all those things. These are apps that are designed to take advantage of all that the iPad offers. And there are almost 250,000 of them to choose from. On top of that, we have over 500,000, 500,000 plus iPhone apps. Every iPhone app written today will work on an iPad. So you tally that all up, and you have almost 750,000 apps available to run on those iPads you're deploying. What this all means is it has become really easy for our users to discover, download, install, and get working apps for virtually any purpose they can come up with. Literally, you would be amazed. So that's a lot of possibilities, and it probably makes a lot of us a little nervous. But then we realize that no matter what app's installed, my data is still secured, is still protected. And the reason this is true is because, first off, the iOS isolates all apps from one another. Okay, it does a implementation that includes sandboxing, right, where each app gets to play in its own sandbox, and they're not really allowed to play in each other's sandbox. And this is one of the reasons where you don't need a whole lot of malware protection on an iPhone or an iPad, right? You don't hear a whole lot about viruses or Trojans being released that are targeting iOS devices. On the other hand, you go to McAfee's site and you look at Android, and you see that it is currently the most targeted mobile platform out there. And one of the reasons for this is Apple's insistence on the implementation of sandboxing. It does prevent a few things, but all in all, I think in the enterprise, it is one of the key reasons that these devices work for us. And another part of this is possibly even more important, and that is that the iOS absolutely shields apps from accessing system components. So apps are not allowed to go in and change your core iOS settings. Again, this is a great inherent built-in protection that you get without doing anything to protect you from malware and, basically the work of many malcontents. Now, I am not trying to say that the iOS will never get a piece of malware or that it won't get a virus. What I'm saying is that currently we don't see that level of activity. We don't see those attacks, and this is why. Now there are, I'm sure, armies of nefarious individuals out there who are trying hard to overcome this and to be the first person that makes, a truly devastating virus for iOS or whatnot. And, where there's a will, there's a way, I guess. So I won't say that we will never see a virus on the iOS. That would be ridiculous for me to say. I don't know. I can't foretell the future. But I do know that as of today, we are protected and we are able to deploy iPads and iPhones into our organizations with a level of confidence that they are fairly well protected by their design. And finally, as far as application security goes, let's take a minute to talk about usernames, passwords, and generally identities that identify us to an application. They are stored by the iOS in an encrypted keychain so that that data cannot easily be extracted without the proper keys and decryption information. So, redeploying. I mentioned this earlier. Redeploying is an important consideration when we talk about iPads in the enterprise, right? Because odds are, if you're supplying a device to your teammates, they may get promoted, they may get other opportunities that cause them to leave your company. Perhaps you laid them off or fired them for whatever reason, but you end up with this iPad back that you want to deploy to a different employee. Well, the great news is that it's very easy to do that. You basically grab the device, you tap Settings, go to General, hit Reset, and select Erase All Content and Settings. Confirm it, and you're done. The device will go through a couple hoops and return itself to exactly the state it was in when you bought it, except that it will retain any iOS software updates you put in. So if you bought the device a while ago and it had, say, iOS 5.01 on it, and you had gone ahead and upgraded it to 5.1, when you do this factory wipe, it will erase all the content, all the settings, and set that back to an out-of-box experience, but it will retain the 5.1 version of iOS that you had already installed. This is a great feature, and I like it a lot. And that's all there is to that. Configuration files. Now we're getting into the meat of how to use these in our enterprise. So let's talk really quickly about what a configuration file is. It's nothing fancy. It's nothing complex. It's just basically an extensible markup language file, an XML file. Why do we have these? Well, we use configuration files to control and configure pretty much most of what the iPad does and how it can do it. We can use configuration files to configure passcodes, to set our passcode policies. We can use it to define how to use programs, functions, the settings for those. We can use configuration profiles to automate app delivery to our devices. Many organizations today are joining up the Apple Developer Program. It's, last I knew, it was still $99 to do so. You get yourself the SDK, and away you go. You make yourself some amazingly valuable enterprise app, and you can use configuration profiles to deploy those to your devices.
settings for email, Wi-Fi, or even VPN. These are very common uses for configuration files. In fact, if you want to know how to create a configuration profile that you can use to connect your iPads automatically into your Exchange infrastructure, head on over to petri.co.il. I've written an article there that tells you exactly step by step how to do that. So check it out. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to hit me up. That's what I'm here for. A last note about configuration files, they can be signed and encrypted for security. So you can create a digital signature so that nobody can modify them without breaking that signature. Or if you really don't want anybody to even be able to look at the file, then you can also encrypt it so that they won't be able to understand what's in it if they open it. Now, on to some other informational areas about configuration profiles. Well, when you install a configuration profile through USB, you do that using what we call the iPhone configuration utility, which we'll get into in a minute. You can also deploy configuration files through the email by sending people an email with the configuration file that they then open and it installs, or through the web. Now, I will note that it's probably become obvious to all of you right now that if you were trying to use a configuration profile to configure email, you wouldn't want to send that by email. The iPad doesn't have access to email, that's why you need the configuration profile. So it would be possibly funny, but not really effective way to deploy that configuration profile. The web, I deploy files via the web all the time. It's probably my favorite way to deploy configuration profiles. You create the file, you put it up at on a web server. An IIS server works great, but you can use Apache or whatnot. And people just open up Safari on their iPad or even iPhones, and they browse to a web link I give them, and boom, it installs the profile. No fuss, no muss. So we can install profiles, and as part of the profile configuration, tell the device that users are not allowed to change any of our settings. Right? So we can hard code those basically and not allow users to get around and alter them. We can also lock the profile to the device. This is handy, especially in a BYOD or bring your own device configuration, where you're allowing people to bring their personal devices in and connect them to your enterprise's infrastructure. Well, you can deploy a profile that, for instance, insists that they have a passcode on the device. And when you deploy that profile, you can set it to allow one of three things. It can either be removed at will, which means the user just goes into settings and says remove, and away it goes. You can set it to never remove, barring a factory wipe, which means once it's on there, it doesn't go away unless they do that erase all content in settings and start over. Or you can meet in the middle, which is my common way of doing it, and you can tell it to not allow removal unless a special password is entered. And you can define what that password is. And let me take a minute to give you a best practice recommendation here. When you choose this option and you set a password, don't use your standard administration password. Okay? If a user calls in and you need to walk them through removing a profile for whatever reason over the phone, you don't want to be giving them a password that now gives them administrative level access to your servers or to your workstations or whatever. You don't want that burden. So pick a password for these profile removal settings that is unique to the profile. That way, if you expose it, you have only created an exposure for the devices that have that profile implemented. Now, the ICU, I briefly mentioned this a moment ago. Let's dive into deeper detail. Okay, the iPhone configuration utility, or ICU, IPCU, there are a number of different acronyms that are tossed around for it. They all refer to the same thing. The iPhone configuration utility is a straightforward, simple, free utility from Apple whose primary purpose is to create, modify, and deploy configuration files. If you're at all like me, writing native XML code is not something you're good at, right? I have a lot of things I'm good at that I specialize in. Writing XML is not one of them. If you enjoy writing XML, by all means, go ahead and write them from scratch yourself in your favorite XML editor. But if you're like me, go get yourself the iPhone configuration utility and download it. It gives you a nice GUI that allows you to pick and choose what you want and then turn them into an XML file, a configuration file. The utility is available for both Mac users and Windows users, okay, in 32 and 64-bit versions. And in addition to creating, encrypting, and installing XML files for you, or these configuration profiles, the ICU has some nice extra value-added features that come in handy. For instance, the ICU has the ability to capture device information, including console logs. And the console logs are kind of the behind-the-scenes matrix-type information, right? All that code that's flying by in the background that you don't see. And if you ever have to get into troubleshooting some esoteric problem with your iPad device, these console logs can come in really handy. Now, if you're not troubleshooting some problem like that, then I suggest you avoid them because it is pretty much just like staring at the matrix, right? I think if you look at it too long, you'll go blind. But don't quote me on that, just a theory. Current version of the ICU is 3.5. It fully supports iOS 5.1 devices, and you typically want to check for a new version of the ICU any time that a new iOS version is released, because they will usually extend the ICU to allow you to configure new options that they've added in the new version of the iOS. If it isn't released at the same time, it will usually follow in short order, right, within a couple weeks or so. I will mention that if you have older iOS versions, you have 4.3 on iPads that are out there and you don't have plans to upgrade them, that the payloads and settings that aren't supported by those 4.3 devices will simply be ignored. Okay, you can still use the current version of the ICU to make your file, deploy it to your device, and that device will just not take advantage of the things that don't apply. Some gotchas. I always like to mention the gotchas, right? These are the things that usually I learn through personal pain and agony and want to prevent you and others from going through that same pain and agony. So when using USB to install a profile, it's automatically signed and encrypted. You don't have to do anything, it just does it for you. But what this means is that any updates to the profile have to be signed by that same original self-signed certificate. So if you use multiple devices running the ICU to deploy profiles via USB, you're probably going to have an unhappy experience. You're going to connect one that you deployed on one device to a different computer, and it's going to argue with you. So to avoid that, I recommend that you use one PC with the IPCU installed to create, modify, install, and export all your configuration profiles. It will just cut down on the problems that you experience. And by the way, if you use that web method I mentioned earlier for distributing your files, which is a great method, don't compress or change the file generated at all. Okay, when the IPCU creates a file, copy that file straight over. It needs to stay with the .mobile config extension, or the iPad will not know how to apply it when you go to that link. So Apple Configurator, right? Apple Configurator is a new utility. A lot of people have heard of the IPCU that I just mentioned, but not as many have heard of Apple Configurator because it was just released a month and a half ago, or actually less than that. It was released at the same time that the new iPad was announced and that iOS 5.1 was released. It is a free, light mobile device management solution, if you will. Okay, it is a great fit if you're a school, right, a small school district or something like that, or you're a mom and pop shop or small business with, you know, a couple dozen employees, or even, you know, 100 employees, but you're just deploying 20 iPads or whatnot. And, you know, in those scenarios, you're probably not interested in buying a multi-$1,000 MDM product. It would be nice, but you probably have a lot of other things on your list that you'd rather invest your hard-earned dollar in. And for you, Apple Configurator is great because it gives you some of the main benefits of MDM. It allows you to mass configure and deploy your updates or your devices. In fact, you can deploy up to 30 at a time, right? You can update devices. This is a great way to get your updates applied. Instead of having everybody, excuse me, instead of having every person who has an iPad in your organization connecting to the internet and downloading a 700 meg file every time a new iOS version is released, you can use Apple Configurator to download the file one time and then deploy it to your devices. Now, larger organizations can still take advantage of Apple Configurator, but they can do it to set up those devices, to apply those updates, to even install enterprise apps, because many larger enterprises actually have their own internal app development going on. They're designing their own apps. It's pretty easy to do. You join the Apple Developer Program. Last I knew it was 99 bucks, and you get a certificate and some other things and start using the SDK, and pretty soon you have your own iPad app. So now what you will often do if you're a large organization, though, is you will use the configurator kind of as a first step, and one of the things it will do is apply a configuration profile to your iPad that then connects that iPad to your larger MDM solution, say a Mobile Iron or AirWatch, Good Technologies products, right? It will just connect them to that, and then from that point on, you can use those full suites to connect, report, manage, and do all the other things that you want to go ahead and do with your devices. So that's the slide deck for today's webinar. I thank you very much for listening. I hope that I've covered some areas that you've enjoyed and that have inspired you. If I have and you're interested in getting more information on those, please follow me on Twitter at Jon O'Neil Sr. I'm often tweeting tips, tricks, new information, download links, all sorts of things. And for in-depth how-to articles, please check out petri.co.il for my weekly iPad how-to articles. Every week, we're writing and posting a new article that gives you details on how to do things. For instance, if you want to know how to use the iPhone configuration utility to create a configuration file today that will deploy to your devices and connect them to your Exchange servers, go to Petri today, do a search for Exchange Active Sync iOS, and you will find an article that tells you just how to do that. So with that, I want to take a look here and see if we have any questions. It looks like we have quite a few questions here. Okay. Any info on how to manage iPads and iPhones remotely? That is an excellent question, and it is a common question. And unfortunately, it is not easy to do. You can do it if you jailbreak an iPhone or an iOS device, but I do not recommend that, right? Jailbreaking is a term where you are superseding the operating system in order to gain administrative level control that shouldn't be there. And in an enterprise, jailbreaking is a great way to open yourself up for malware and other attacks. So those solutions that would offer you that unfortunately require you to do something that I wouldn't want you to do. But stay tuned. Things are constantly changing, and there is a lot of app development work on that right now that we're watching for. Watch my Twitter account, because trust me, as soon as I see something, I will share it with the world. As for the different web browsers, are there any security concerns running a third-party web browser that supports Flash on the iPad? This question is from Michael. Well, Michael, every app brings with it its own set of considerations and concerns, but none that I think you really need to be concerned about, because those underlying rules that Apple applies, right, where every app has to be vetted directly by them, Every app has to be isolated. Every app can't touch system settings and those kind of things. Because of those, you are fairly protected from getting holes in the different apps that you don't have in the built-in apps, like you would have with, say, installing Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer on your PC or Mac. You don't really have those on the iPad. You're somewhat protected. What you typically will have is that the third-party browser will not provide you all the functionality you want, right? So something Safari does really well that you like, but then you went and got Atomic because it does something else that Safari doesn't do, well, then the thing Atomic does well, it doesn't do the other things that Safari does well. It does those badly. So you really have to look at them and see if they fit. Here's a great question from Tony. Can you block apps you do not want installed on a corporate device? Excellent question, and yes, you can. Okay, and that is actually a very common use for MDM solutions and policies, is to enable restrictions and to control content. Okay, in a BYOD scenario, and that's a webinar for another day, but in a BYOD scenario where it's the user's device, you have to find a marriage between what they want on their own device and what you want for your corporate data. On a organization provided device where you've bought the device and are giving them to use, you have a much easier path to saying these are the apps that we will allow you to install and no others. These are the things we'll allow you to do and no others. And configuration profiles and MDM utilities from AirWatch, Good Technology, all those tools give you a very clear path on how to do that. If you have any questions, hit me up. Here's another question about that, actually, the Awesome Wild Stuff website. The Awesome Wild Stuff website is exactly that, www.awesomewildstuff.com. If you go there right now, there's kind of just a teaser page, but trust me, there is some amazing content on its way. But what you can do is my email is listed there. You can hit me up. It's just jon'oneilsr@awesomewildstuff.com, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Now, Dean mentioned that caution on Dropbox as it allows anything into and out of it, including viruses and Trojans. Yes, it does, but here we go with the iPad. You get the advantage of that iOS built-in security, okay, where it becomes hard to infect the device with anything just because of that isolation. Russ asks, do you believe that one day mobile devices such as iPads will ultimately replace the desktop, laptop as a fully functional, work-suitable device? I believe that it already does for certain users. I believe that the IT environment is, and the business environment and the education environment and the government environment are so fluid and constantly changing that there is no one device that will ever answer all the needs all the time for all the users. So you really have to figure out what the person needs and what they do. But I know many people today, as a matter of fact, a friend of mine who is a vice president with MCPC, which is a computer reseller, only uses an iPad. He has not booted his notebook in over 6 months, okay? And he books flights on it, he does his email, he attends webinars and go to meetings, he does video conferencing, many things that a VP would do, and he does it all just from that one device, his iPad. So I believe you will start to see more and more of that. You will see graphic designers that are able to do that with some of the utilities that are coming out. You will see educators that are able to do that because of the material that they want to create and consume are empowered from that. I believe that what you will see is more and more opportunity to deploy these devices in lieu of other devices and better suit your users' desires, add better value to your organization. I'm looking down here. Hi, Ray asks, if we were planning to deploy 100 devices, which MDM solutions do you recommend? Well, Ray, there is a lot of MDM development going on right now, and much of it is good. I love the products from AirWatch, Mobile Iron, Good Technology. Okay, those are good solutions. They all have great demos and scenarios that you can check out, and for further discussion, hit me up. I'm glad to help you, but those are 3 good ones to take a look at. Bill asks, do I have an email address we could use to contact me at? Yes. Again, it's J. O'Neil Sr. at awesomewildstuff.com. Here's a good question from Sabri. How can we put iPads to serve in healthcare field like hospitals and medical centers? This is a great one. I did some work for a medical organization where the doctors use iPads, and one of the doctors actually takes care of critical care patients and went on vacation, and he actually uses his iPad. He gets streamed to him through VPN. He has to connect through the VPN so that it is secured, but he gets streamed to him real-time data on, vitals, right? So blood pressure and temperature and those kind of things, but as well as cardiac monitors. Gets access to X-ray data and those kind of things. So the technology definitely supports it. And in fact, the doctors that I've spoken with tend to love it because they can use their hands. Doctors are great with their hands. They've developed a skill to take care of all of us that requires them to be that way, especially surgeons and that kind of thing. So using a keyboard and a mouse is not as natural to them as using their own hands. So you take a touch-sensitive device like an iPhone or an iPad. The iPhone screen is just too small, really. But they can work with things in space. So they can flip the images, they can rotate them around, they can take a look at things, and they can interact. And because this is able to get to them in near real time or real time, wherever they are, it connects them at the next level to their patients. Now, you, in a healthcare environment, have to make sure that you don't implement these solutions in a way that disagrees with HIPAA or any number of the other regulations that you have to comply with, as well as your own internal data policies. And one of the problems many healthcare agencies have is they have very disconnected systems. And as long as those are disconnected, it becomes hard to take a consumption device like the iPad in this scenario and connect it into all of them at the same time. But I do see that growing. How can I print on my wired HP printers, asked Galt. Well, Galt, I hope you're still on there because I want to point you back to Petri. Go to petri.co.il, and in a week or two, you will find an article that tells you exactly how to do what you're asking for to any wired printer. And it uses a technology from Google, actually, called Google Cloud Print. And that article, I believe, will be up in the next week or so. So keep an eye out for it. How can I run Flash on my iPad, from Steve? Well, Steve, go back in the webinar and look at those solutions for remote access. Like SplashTop is a great one. What you do is you use SplashTop from your iPad to connect to your PC or Mac, and the Flash will actually run on your PC or Mac. But you'll be viewing it and interacting with it on your iPad. How do you require a passcode length? Isn't it only 4 digits, from Justin? No, Justin, you can change that so that it actually becomes a true password. Now, that being said, I'm obviously speaking to the recent versions of iOS, not way back into the dark ages, 2 years ago. But yeah, you can. Michael asks, is iCloud considered a secure file storage solution for enterprises? Well, right now, iCloud requires you to have a personal iTunes account, which is something you don't have to do to deploy iPads in any of the ways that I've talked about. The problem with that is you are now allowing your users to store your data in their cloud that they maintain control of outside your organization. So I want to caution you about that, right? You will want to choose what kind of data you allow them to store. If you are primarily deploying the iPad as a consumption device, you're using it to stream information to them, right, so that they can consume content rather than create it, odds are it's not a problem, because what they're really backing up are the settings and apps installed on the device, which aren't a problem. If you're creating content on the device of any sort, if you're deploying enterprise apps to the device, then you may want to look at other options for backup other than iCloud, at least right now. I do think Apple will extend the use of iCloud for enterprises in the coming years. Okay, Tony has asked, is there a way to centrally control these options on a one-by-one basis? Something to control them all centrally? IT policy like a BlackBerry enterprise server for BlackBerry? Yes, you might have asked that question actually before we got into talking about the IPCU, Apple Configurator, and the other MDM solutions like AirWatch, Good Technology, Mobile Iron, those guys. Here's a good question. Which settings take effect on a device? The ones you create using the iPhone config utility or Exchange Active Sync settings? And the answer is both. So, you know, currently Exchange Active Sync, if you have Exchange 2010, there is well over a couple hundred Active Sync policies that you can get into, and most all of them will apply to your iOS devices if you've configured them for Exchange. But you can also set complementary policies through, say, a configuration profile that forces a passcode on the device. So you can use them both. Don has asked another question about the medical field and how do you make the iPad secure enough to use in the medical field. I've been told that only the BlackBerry devices are secure enough for HIPAA and government offices. And as I mentioned, there are hospitals and medical facilities that are using iPads and such. It's how you implement them, right? You have to be able to prove that you have remote wipe capabilities, that you have the ability to you know, destroy the data that's on these devices whether or not you have physical control of it. That's an important consideration. One thing that the iPad does do that other devices don't do, right, is you have the whole Find My iPhone functionality, the GPS, so you can locate devices. You can you know, use those to help, like you've all probably heard the news reports of people using the Find My iPhone functionality to send the police to the person that stole their iPhone. Well, the same thing comes in handy with enterprise deployments to a different degree, where you can see and monitor the spread of your devices. You deploy 100 devices and you find out that 75% of them are used on your campus and 25% of them are used, you know, 100 miles away. Then you know what your support areas of importance should be. Well, I know I've run a little bit over here, so I will go ahead and turn it back over. Again, I encourage anyone who has any questions to go ahead and hit me up. I will do what I can to help you out.
That's all the time we have today. Thanks again for attending and for your participation. As a reminder, today's webinar was recorded and will be available to view tomorrow morning. at trainsignal.com/blog/webinars. We will also email you the link. And remember, as you leave, please fill out the survey for a chance to win the Enterprise iPhone and iPad Administrator's Guide written by Charles Edge. We will email the winner by the end of the week. Thanks again, and have a great day.